Hi, everybody. Welcome to part two of the series I'm doing on shunning, how to deal with it. And I'm just really going to be reading from the text that you can see right in front of you on the post on Facebook. But so don't mind me if I look at the paper every so often. Experiencing the shunning that JWs are famous for can be a lot like being stuck in a maze, especially if the people who are shunning us are close family members, mothers, fathers, grandmothers, grandfathers, our siblings, even our own children, because those familial relationships never end. Our mother will always be our mother. Our children will always be our children. Whichever way we turn, those people in relationships are still at some point who we are. Getting through the shunning maze does not mean ending the shunning, except for perhaps rare cases. We are virtually powerless to make the shunning stop, since we can't control the thinking of the shunners. And we all know that as long as they are JWs, they will always believe that they're acting out of love for us and that we are the ones who are making the shunning happen. Any pain we feel is simply proof to them that we are in dire need of repentance, turning our lives around, and reinstatement. Beyond that, our pain really has no meaning to them. So what we really want is to stop getting stuck in those emotional dead ends where we are always coming face to face with a relationship that we can't fix. That's why I pictured it as a maze, but really it's not a maze with only one route out. Neither is it a cycle with discrete phases. Learning to cope with, heal from, and thrive beyond shunning is a process. For that process to be healthy, it must lead to acceptance. We'll explain acceptance a little bit later, but along the way, we will experience most of or all of the various aspects of any grieving process: shock and denial, pain and guilt, anger and resentment, sadness, which includes depression, reflection, loneliness, upturns and downturns, rebuilding, and acceptance. Every single one of those things is normal to experience. Just as it's normal to cry at a funeral, we may cry over being shunned. Just as it's normal to experience anger before, during, or after that same funeral, we may feel anger and frustration over being shunned. Always remember that all emotions are normal, and there is no such thing as a negative emotion. It's only when difficult, painful emotions persist over time or they become inappropriately intense that it may become debilitating and even result in us hurting ourselves or others. In their proper places, all emotions have healing properties, and therefore they all have purpose, and they're actually all necessary. Well, so it's good to know that we're normal, right? But chances are we'd still prefer not to experience things like pain and sadness, right? So how do we get there? Well, until we get to rebuilding ourselves and we finally get to acceptance, we're doomed to repeat any or all of those painful emotions if we get stuck. That means, for example, if we're stuck in anger and resentment, we will not make it to rebuilding and acceptance. And we will also at times experience pain, sadness, and any or all of the other emotions. It's only rebuilding and acceptance that will get us past the painful emotions. So again, the question is, how do we get there? Acceptance means accepting the situation for what it is and not continually fighting it. It means accepting who we are. It means knowing that we are good, basically, and being happy with who we are. It means being willing and anxious to rebuild with whatever resources we have. It means moving forward despite the odds. Okay, but how in the world does one accept the reality of shunning? I mean, how does one accept something that is absolutely unacceptable? Well, three things. First, putting things into perspective. Then, practice forgiveness. And third, practicing gratitude. So first, perspective. We know how Jehovah's Witnesses think. I mean, we used to be a Jehovah's Witness, so of course we know how they think. Maybe we were unwillingly a Jehovah's Witness, but we were raised as one with no other choice, but we still know how they think. And more than likely, we shared some of that thinking at least at one time. We might have even agreed to some extent with the shunning practice and participated in it. Naturally, that did nothing to prepare us for what we're now experiencing, especially if it's close family members that are hurting us. But really, is it reasonable to expect anything else from them? As long as they're JWs, they are duty bound to think exactly as instructed. Their thinking is incredibly limited, while ours is expansive. So any anger and resentment we display toward them, any tit-for-tat reactions, will only further convince them that they are right and we are wrong. Remember, it's about perspective, which leads to forgiveness. Really? Who are we forgiving and for what? I mean, really? We have to forgive somebody? Well, first and foremost, we can forgive ourselves. It's not necessarily for the behavior that is the reason for the shunning, but for allowing ourselves to be any part of that awful religious system in the past. Even if it wasn't our fault because we were born into it, give ourselves the freedom that comes with forgiveness. Know that we are a good person who doesn't deserve to be shamed. Look at ourselves in the mirror, smile, and tell ourselves that we are a good person and that we deserve forgiveness. Also, yes, I'm going to say it, we can forgive the shunners. Sounds crazy. I know it sounds outrageous, but I mean, how can any mother completely violate the very laws of nature by putting blind obedience to the men who are operating a destructive religious organization above love for their own offspring? How do you forgive something like that? How is it even forgivable in any universe? Well, when we forgive, we're not necessarily saying that the person, what they did is okay. And we're not withholding forgiveness until they completely stop what they're doing. We are just letting go of resentment. We are setting ourselves free. So unabated anger, bitterness, and resentment will eat us alive and completely rob us of any chance at happiness and contentment. And so let's not allow that to happen. Let's let go of resentment and forgive. If it still seems illogical and wrong to do that, and I understand why it would, and you might think, like, this guy crazy, how am I supposed to forgive somebody for doing that? But just try it. So once we've done it, we'll probably understand what it really means to forgive and the beauty of it and the freedom that it will bring to us. Now, forgiveness leads to the third thing, which is gratitude. There are so many things to be grateful for. It can be as simple as waking up alive one more day, breathing, having our favorite cereal for breakfast, knowing that we're smarter and more important than the bug that just flew into a bug whacker, hearing a beautiful piece of music that just comes out of nowhere, looking out our window and seeing a twig of a tree branch with just one leaf blowing in the wind, being able to do a crossword puzzle, drinking a glass of cold water. All of those things are things we could be grateful for. Or we might find some gratitude in knowing what we know and for the person who taught us what we know. I'll use a personal example. I'm extremely grateful for having an expansive and accepting attitude toward people of all kinds, whether, regardless of race, gender, economic status, social status. And part of me is part of that education I think I got from the JWs. Well, I don't really know. Maybe I would have found that out anyway if I wasn't, because I wasn't a JW until I was 15, 16 years old. So maybe I would have learned it anyway. I don't know. But the fact is, I learned it in part, partly from my parents and everything, but also partly from the JWs. So the point is, I am who I am, and I learned some of it from the JWs. Had my parents been JWs, they weren't, but had they been, I suppose then I'd have to be grateful for being so instructed by my JW parents, even though they would be shunning me right now. So there's very little in life that's good all of the time, and there's very little in life that's bad all of the time. There's always some good and some bad with almost everything. So practicing gratitude for the good makes it impossible to remain in a state of anger, bitterness, and resentment over the bad. So try it. Try changing your perspective. Try practicing forgiveness. Try practicing gratitude. It probably won't stop the shunning, but it will make acceptance possible and easier. So again, this is part 2 of a series, and so there's more to come. Thanks.